I saw this pretty cool video the other day. A bunch of guys were doing tricks on a trampoline, but the trampoline was on an open train car that was moving pretty quickly along the train tracks. From the trampoline perspective, they were only moving up and down. But from the side of the road perspective, they were moving up and down and going forward at the same time. This is the exact scenario that led Einstein to discover the theory of relativity. It wasn't like in the movies when you have a scientist in front of a huge chalkboard with a bunch of equations, where he looks up at all the equations, suddenly is inspired, and has his aha discovery moment. Instead, Einstein was literally watching a train go by, and he thought about the idea of relative motion. Just like the trampoline video. The guys on the trampoline have a certain assumption based on their frame of reference about their velocity. Somebody standing on the side of the road has a different assumption based on their frame of reference about their velocity. And that assumption turned out to be the heart of both special and general relativity, of looking at a situation and being able to make a different assumption than the normal assumption. In both situations, he thought to himself, most people think this is true, but what if this were true? What would that mean? For special relativity, the math is easy. For general relativity, the math was too difficult for Einstein, so he had to call in a pinch hitter. Both theories, general and special relativity, are kind of hard to wrap your mind around this. Both involve the idea of space-time being one kind of thing. Relativity is something that involves very large spaces and very fast speeds. Both of these are way outside of our normal human intuition. So even if you take out all the math, wrapping your mind around these ideas isn't easy. In general relativity, which is all about gravity, it's about how large objects actually warp space-time. Kind of like putting a bowling ball on a trampoline. But since space-time is 3 dimensions and trampolines are 2 dimensions, that bowling ball on a trampoline example is only an approximation. Another aspect of both general and special relativity is the flow of time. Einstein famously said that relativity is that when you are sitting on a hot stove, time moves very slowly. When you are sitting with a cute girl, time moves very quickly. Some psychologists have been doing experiments that show that one of our deep and very ancient instincts is how we measure the flow of time internally. Natural selection and evolution is always looking for ways for us and every other life form to increase efficiency. One way they think this works in us and other primates is how we experience time. If we perceive time as going quickly, that's a quick proxy for being in a good situation. So the fast passing of time is a signal to keep doing whatever you are doing. If time is moving very slowly, it's an indication that something is wrong and we need to make some drastic changes. It's very confusing to understand the difference between cause and effect. So they have to do plenty of experiments to verify that this is true. Some suspect that we can not only measure the flow of time from an unconscious perspective, but we can also change it. Not change the actual flow of time as others perceive it, but slow it down or speed it up as we perceive it. For example, if you are very bored, you can go inside and make time go much, much quicker. Or if you are in a situation where you need to think, you can go inside and make time go much, much slower. Like if you are in a job interview and you need to think of a good answer, you can go inside and from your own perspective, take an hour to come up with a good answer. But from the job interviewer's perspective, that answer will only take an extra half second or so. If you can learn to master this, you can get A's on all your tests. You can become extremely persuasive in any conversation. You can become extremely seductive in any conversation. All it takes is being able to practice doing this, to go inside and learn how to control the flow of time. One of the biggest mind-bending ideas from general relativity is what happened right at the beginning of time. Most people have the incorrect idea that when the Big Bang happened, there was a whole bunch of empty space. And then there was an explosion in the middle of all this empty space, and the matter and energy slowly expanded into the empty space. But general relativity says that space and time are the same thing. So at the very beginning of time, all space, time, matter, and energy were all at the very center of everything. Outside of this singular point, there was no space, no time, no energy, and no matter. And when the Big Bang happened, all the time and matter and space and energy slowly expanded. That's why if you go one direction in space, you'll end up coming from the other direction in space, because space only exists inside this bubble of space-time that makes up the whole universe. Outside of this, there is no time, no matter, no energy, and no space. It's easy to figure out special relativity using only the Pythagorean theorem, which means anybody can figure it out using the train example. Another example of relative speed would be like driving without your seatbelt. If the trampoline train suddenly stopped, the guys jumping up and down would be flung forward at whatever speed the train was moving at. If you crash your car and you're not wearing your seatbelt, you'll crash into the steering wheel at the same speed your car was driving at. That would be like jumping off a 3-story building and landing on a steering wheel on a sidewalk. If you do that right after your chest hits the steering wheel, your head will crash into the sidewalk. And if your head crashes into the sidewalk, you can't use the Pythagorean theorem, because psychologists have determined that in order to use your brain correctly, it has to be inside your skull and not on the sidewalk.